It's Clayton, and welcome to a Celldweller production. I'm going to show you a little bit of how I produce and make my noises and general chaos in the studio. And today I've decided to focus on Modular World, which is all over here, and I've really honed in on one module that I use a lot, which is the Hertz donut by a company called the Harvestman. This here, just for a little bit of history, is the first module I actually ever received in my studio. So this is the first module, and this came from Australia because I didn't think I could find them in the US, so I found them for sale in Australia and waited a month to get it, which was really dumb. But that's how you learn. But I've had this since then, and he has released a Mark II of this, which has more features, and it looks cooler. And I've kept them both because they both do slightly different things. Here's my disclaimer. I'm not a rocket scientist. I failed shop. I'm terrible at math, and I'm not an engineer. So I can't tell you every single detail finitely how it works and how many volts are going to this. But the purpose of this blog is really for me to tell you how I produce. Shout out to guys like Surchai and Trash Audio, and I learned a lot from watching his blogs. You can seek him out on YouTube. There's plenty of places to go to fill in the blanks that I'm certainly going to leave here today. So I'll show you what I do, and then if you're interested, you can dig even further. That's what I did. That's how I got from there to here. So we're going to start with the basics. I'm just going to show you what a sound sounds like coming out of the Hertz donut just straight. It's a beautiful two oscillator machine. So there's two oscillators, these big orange knobs, each represent the pitch of each oscillator. There are modes you can put this unit in that allow this oscillator to modulate that oscillator. And you have varying degrees of intensity and different modes that will give you great sounding, beautiful, thick, rich oscillators or complete chaos. So this is a great module for me because I can kind of go all over the spectrum from really pretty sounding stuff to really crazy, noisy, obnoxious stuff. And this thing is great for making Reese's, for those of you out there who are interested in doing that. So let's get a sound out of this thing. And that's just a basic oscillator. You can change the oscillator type here, and this is oscillator 1. I'm going to leave it on a saw. You've got a sine, a triangle, and a saw down here, as far as I know. And here's the modulation. This modulation oscillator we're not really hearing right now until I turn this. So when I turn this, so there are different modes that you can put this in, like I said. And things get noisy and crazy. So really what I tend to do is mess around for quite a while, and I just record for an hour or two at a time of me just simply doing this, tweaking knobs, and the possibilities are endless. This thing not only has a modulation oscillator output, which is basically the main output from the primary oscillator here, but you've got a secondary output too, so you can get your second oscillator. You can get it nice and clean sounding, or that can also be tweaked out depending on what mode you have it in. Now each oscillator also has a nice square wave output. So you can kind of use those to do your typical oscillator type functions without it sounding too crazy and chaotic. So you've got all these inputs, and I'm turning all these knobs, which is really fantastic, but when you're recording, you don't always want to sit here and manually turn knobs. That's why you have all of these wonderful inputs here that allow you to send other things from Modular World and my DAW, which is Cubase. I am using the Expert Sleepers ES series hardware, and I'm using the Silent Way software to completely interconnect my DAW with Modular World. And I would absolutely recommend that you do as well, because that was my biggest frustration, is I had all these really cool hardware devices, and I could not figure out how to really effectively control them and get them into my computer because I am a computer-based dude. So using Expert Sleeper's hardware and software has really simplified and beautified my experience. So let's say for simplicity, I want to do that. Well, I don't want to sit here and do that manually. So what I can do is take a cable here and go from something like just a simple sine wave to this input. And you can hear it already. So what this is doing is spitting out a low frequency oscillator, a signal, and that's a sine wave, which is basically modulating this input. So it's effectively doing this. And in varying degrees. This attenuator or attenuverter allows you to send a quantified amount of this signal and control how much. There are certain inputs in Modular world that you can input, but you can't control the amount of how much is going in. So it's basically 100% of whatever signal you're sending in. When you have an attenuator or an attenuverter on a module like this, that allows you to control just how much is actually going in to modulate that parameter. Here's another instance of another parameter we can tweak. And we can basically do the same exact thing if we want to. Wrong input. So you can hear the effect that has. And you've got different waveforms here on your LFO, so I can do a waveform that sweeps up. You can see the way it looks. We've got waveforms that will start high and drop. You can hear that effect. Now, where the real fun actually begins for me is sending sequencer data into this and actually creating sequences. You start creating sequences. So, for instance, I'm going to take my Metropolis by IntelliGel, which I absolutely love, and I'm going to input that to the 1 volt per octave input, which is what controls the pitch. That controls the pitch of your oscillator. So this is spitting out information which are control voltages, and they're quantized, which means they're set to musical scales, and it's input into this 1 volt per octave. So as you can hear, we've got a little melody going, and the tempo is completely changeable with my DAW. If I speed the tempo up in my DAW, this will speed up because it's all clocked through Expert Sleepers. There's a single oscillator for all intents and purposes. I can change the tone, the oscillator type, and now I can start adding in my modulation oscillator as well. Now what's happening here is this oscillator is moving and this one is not. So this is at a static pitch and this one's not. So what I can do is use a cable over here, which is called a stackable, because you can not only plug this in, but you can plug another cable into there and basically which means you're multiplying that same source. So what I do is go into 1 volt per octave here, and now I can go into the 1 volt per octave on the second oscillator, and now both oscillators are being controlled by the Atlantis at the same time. So this pitch is moving exactly the way that is. So here we go, we're back to a clean oscillator sound. I got rid of the modulation oscillator, and for the sake of those out there who enjoy frequency modulation like my boy Seamless and others, let's send a pitch from this oscillator into the frequency modulation input on the Hertz donut. And when you do that, you can hear instantly the pitch of this oscillator is affecting the timbre of the primary oscillator. So here is what this sounds like. I'm going to tweak some knobs so you can hear what it does. So let's pretend I've got something going there that I like. And we'll only pretend because this is certainly not the best thing I've ever done. The fantastic thing about modulars is that sometimes you create incredible things that you could never replicate, and then there are a lot of times where you create stuff and it's just complete crap, and you actually question your own existence and why you have ever even purchased a module to begin with. And I do that a lot. Fortunately, there are those moments where I create something cool and it justifies my existence and my owning all of these modules. So that's the good news for me. So let's, like I would normally do, let's take this and we'll take this signal and let's go into a filter. In fact, I will go into, let's go here into the MMF2, which is one of the best sounding filters I've ever heard in my life. So we're fairly distorted right now. Got different modes on the Schwayman. To create a randomly opening and closing filter, I'll use something like this Wogglebug module by Make Noise. And I'll clock that so that the timing of this is exactly what's coming out of the Metropolis, which is the sequence we're hearing. And so that is firing at the same exact time. And then this output, which is a stepped random voltage, I will take and put into one of these CV inputs, which you can hear very quickly. Now another thing I can do to add some punch and attack to this sound is use an envelope that is firing again with the same clock that's coming off the Metropolis, that's causing it to pulse every time it gets a gate high signal. And then I'll take the output of this and I'll send this into the second CV input, and you can hear instantly the effect that this is having on the filter. So when I start dialing in the parameters of the envelope, that will change the way the filter is reacting. Another example of how I can use an envelope, I'll take that out, and we'll use this actually for volume of the entire signal going into the DAW. So this same envelope is going to now control the volume, which you can hear immediately. that filter sounds incredible. So there's a pretty plain sounding oscillator, bringing some modulation frequency of the modulation oscillator. And you just start tweaking. I would use something like that. I don't know what I would use it for, but I love that sound. So as you can imagine, there are many things here that I didn't have time to explain, and I'm sure I didn't do the most amazing job explaining all of it because it works in my head, but I forget that maybe it doesn't totally work in yours because you don't completely follow what I'm doing. So I'm going to be doing more of these, and maybe you'll pick up some information that will be helpful to you. I also wanted to point out something, just for nostalgia's sake. This piece, the Hertz Donut Mark I, is almost entirely responsible for the track On the Surface of Scardonia from my Blackstar score. Act 1 of the Blackstar score, my novel, that is primarily the drony sound you hear for 14 minutes in that track, just being modulated slowly. So check that out for a good example of how I would take something like this and turn it into something that I would present to you to listen to. Thanks for sticking around for this episode of Celldweller Production. I hope you learned something, and again, I am a lifetime student, and I'm not claiming that I know everything in the world. I'm just showing you how I produce because there are at least a few of you out there that actually want to know that. Make sure to subscribe to my page, like or share this video, and I'd love to see your comments below. Until next time, this is Clayton signing off.